Since the dawn of time, circa 2005, children everywhere have debated which avatar bending style was superior. Ironically, missing the entire point of the show. Countless wars have been waged over these debates, turning playgrounds into battlegrounds and cafeterias into mass graves. For years, people had no guidance, no leader, no one to bridge the gap between warring nations and bring peace to the four elements. That is, until me. Ladies and gentlemen, I come bearing the answers you seek. I have compiled the definitive bending tier list to finally put an end to this 100-year war. Now, I know that the point of Avatar is that no bending style is better than any other, and that all bending styles should live in harmony with each other. But you're not gonna find that level of maturity on this page. Nah, we're going 4th grade playground rules, okay? Someone has always gotta be able to kick somebody else's ass. I mean, what's even the point of having a rich, detailed world with a complex magic system if you can't even theorize which 12-year-old would win in a fight? Now, obviously not everyone's gonna agree with all of my rankings, but as the Avatar, sometimes you've gotta come to terms with the fact that not everyone will be pleased with your decisions. So just know that even if you hate my list and flame me in the comments, nothing you say can ever diminish the god complex that making this video has given me. And with that out of the way, let's get on to our list. Okay, so we're gonna start with the subbending categories and leave the big 4 for last. That way at the end we can see where all the subbending categories go, and it'll help us evaluate where the big 4 should be. Now there is a D ranking on this list, but no bending style is really that bad. Except for spirit projection. Spirit projection can blow me. Oh, I'm sorry, you want me to rank objectively the worst part of the Legend of Korra higher? It's like the only thing that Jinora does, and Jinora sucks. Apparently this is only a technique that airbenders can do, which doesn't make any sense, but fine. It's basically Airbender's version of seismic sense, and allows them to traverse areas they otherwise wouldn't be able to. But unlike seismic sense, where you just stomp the ground and get a good sense of your surroundings, spirit projection requires you to sit crisscross applesauce and bore all of your viewers into submission. It's boring, it's lame, it's barely a style of bending, it can blow me. I honestly don't know why this was on the tier list, but energy bending wasn't. But energy bending is also D tier. Anytime I talk about bending on my pages, I always get a ton of comments being like, oh, but energy bending's the best one, you could take away another person's bending with it. Yeah, you could, but only if you're the Avatar and can get within like arm's reach of your opponent. All bending styles are long range, so if you manage to get close enough to your opponent to energy bend them, odds are you've already won the fight. It's short range, super hard to use, and if it's feeling generous, it can blow me. Up next is combustion bending. I have a soft spot in my heart for combustion bending, because it's rad. It's just slaughter bending. They should have called Sparky Boom Man Tank Face on account of his fucking tank face. I love how dangerous and destructive it is. Like the second a combustion bender enters the battlefield, everyone else has to deal with them. They're just such a commanding presence because they're so insanely powerful. However, I would like to remind people that, as far as we know, 100% of combustion benders have accidentally killed themselves. Not great, guys, really puts a damper on the whole style if you ask me. The coolest part of combustion bending is also the worst part of it. It's just too damn destructive. Yeah, it's great if you're fighting in an open field or something, but you're boned in any kind of enclosed space. Also, all it takes is like a mild boo-boo to the forehead to put a combustion bender out of commission. If combustion benders weren't constantly killing themselves, this would be A tier for sure. But I can't in good conscience put a technique with a 100% mortality rate anywhere above B tier. Also, again, big fan of combustion bending, but to be honest, all it does is blow things up. There are no defensive or mobility capabilities, you can't, like, build anything out of combustion bending, it just kills people. B tier. Real quick, can we just talk about how underappreciated metal bending is? If you just start throwing shards of metal at someone, there are very few things that are going to prevent that. Like, what's a firebender gonna do against a skilled metal bender? Cry? Yeah, I guess you could melt metal, but like, the only way a firebender is gonna be strong enough to do that is under Sozin's Comet. Or at the very least, I don't think your average firebender can melt a flying shard of metal before it reaches their very squishy neck. The only downside to metal bending is that it's pretty rare to just naturally stumble across metal in the world, so you're gonna have to come strapped with some metal already on you. And in a world where people can twist and crush certain elements with their mind, you definitely don't want to be wearing one of those elements on your body. You could go from wearing a very fashionable jacket one second to a literal guillotine the next. Seriously, the biggest threat to a metal bender is another metal bender. Kavir had a cool idea of designing her outfits to have shards of metal all over them, so she's always got a weapon on hand. But couldn't a more experienced metal bender just fucking stab her to death with her own outfit? I guess if you go that route, you kinda have to be confident that you're gonna be the best metal bender in the room. The only thing keeping this from being S tier is that it's probably the most limited bending resource around. But if you've got a ton of metal on hand, it's without a doubt one of the strongest bending techniques. Up next is healing, and it's C tier. Oh, shut up! You really think the boo-boo kissy technique deserves to be on the same level as tank face? Look, healing's dope. It's a great addition to waterbending. But on its own, you might as well get me 2 tickets to Snooze-a-Palooza. Oh, but healing was strong enough to bring Aang back from the dead. Yeah, if you got a vial of magic water. If metal bending's getting A tier because it's hard to find metal in the world, you better believe the magic water requirement is knocking healing down a few pegs. Healing's cool, but primarily as like a complement to waterbending. Mudbending's also C tier because it's just goopy earthbending. In a way, it's almost better than earthbending because it's liquid earth. So, unlike regular earthbending, you can shape and mold it, harden it, soften it. It's actually got a lot more capabilities than earthbending because it's so pliable, but it's also so damn rare to find naturally. Don't get me wrong, there's mud everywhere. Like, if it rained, though. Unless you're hanging out with a waterbender at all times or living in a swamp, it's gonna be pretty rare that you're frequently coming across mud. On top of that, even hardened mud is gonna be way more brittle than, like, the softest rock. Swamp bending. Go fuck yourself. Look, swamp bending's cool, but no it isn't. It's kinda cool that they're bending the water within leaves to, like, manipulate plants, but have you ever been hurt by a plant leaf? Yeah, neither has anybody else. This is just such a hyper-specific bending style that only works in a hyper-specific environment. It's like sand bending. Oh no! Hope I don't get into a tussle on the beach, and only the beach! Sand and swamp bending barely deserve mentioning. They're D tier. In their environments, they're good, but when are you ever in their environments? Okay, hear me out. Lava bending is just sticky fire bending. When you get hit with fire, you're like, ooh, that's hot on my little shoulder. But when you get hit with lava, you burn forever. And you would think that that would make lava bending better than fire bending. And you're correct. You see, I think somehow we've all like Mandela affected ourselves into thinking that lava bending sucks. When I was first making this video, I was like, yeah, lava bending's cool and it's really powerful, but it's way too slow to be anything above a B tier. But then I started looking up some clips of lava bending, and it's wicked fast. So then I called up my friend and I was like, hey, do you think lava bending should be S tier? And he was like, absolutely not. It's way too slow. What is going on here? And so I called my girlfriend and I'm like, what do you think of lava bending? And she's like, oh, lava bending sucks. It's just slower fire bending. Holy shit. We've all tricked ourselves into nerfing lava bending. And maybe it's just me and my friend group, you know? Maybe everyone else knows that lava bending is super powerful. But I have to assume that the reason we did this is because lava bending is actually OP, and so we all just mentally nerfed it as to not upset the very delicate balance of all the elements. You know, like, I feel like in a lot of people's minds, lava bending was just like a step too far. Some people think firebenders should be the one to lava bend, some people think it should be a combination between earth and firebenders. Regardless, lava bending is OP. It essentially turns earthbenders into water and firebenders, and earthbenders, because they can take earth and turn it into a flaming liquid and then harden it again so they keep their defensive capabilities. Lava benders have complete control over the battlefield. The fact that they can turn their terrain into something lethal is beyond powerful. Imagine trying to fight a guy who's essentially earth, fire, and water bending, while also having to play a very real, very tense game of the floor is lava. And like I said, they can also harden it again to make defensive walls, or break off small pieces of rock and turn them into like flaming shurikens. Now, like combustion benders, lava benders do run the risk of accidentally killing themselves, which by now we all know I'm not a big fan of. But I honestly feel like a master lava bender would never actually run into this problem. Kazan was a quitter. He chose to bring that cave down on himself. That was absolutely a choice he made. That was not an accident. I'm sure it is difficult to lava bend while simultaneously making sure you don't burn yourself, but just because something's hard doesn't mean it isn't good. It's essentially a more lethal version of water bending that's just as fast, if not slightly slower. Lava bending gets our first S. You guys want to talk about an actual slow-ass bending style? I think it's time somebody checked lightning bending into a fucking retirement home. And look, lightning bending's cool. Arguably, the coolest bending style. To shoot lightning out of my fingertips would be the coolest thing ever. But that doesn't change the fact it takes like 40 minutes of Tai Chi just to fire one bolt off. Oh, but once you fire it, it's fast as lightning, right? No! No, it isn't. Lightning benders shoot the slowest lightning ever. This lightning is so slow that your opponent has time to turn, take 2 wide steps, and dive in front of it before it ever reaches its target. And I get that sometimes you don't need the 60-minute wind-up, but sometimes you do. So like, which is it, Korra? But to be fair, once you fire it, it is super lethal and has minimal chance of killing the user. Oh wait, unless somebody catches it and fucking throws it back at you. Look, for all the shit I'm giving it, lightning bending is super strong. If combustion bending is like a rocket launcher, lightning bending's like a sniper rifle. It's also a major plus that it's one of the few bending styles you can perform anywhere. I mean, unless you're super cold, but the odds of a firebender finding themselves in the Arctic is like pretty slim. That being said, the fact that it has the super slow charge up time and no defensive capabilities keeps it from being a little higher on the list. Up next is flight, which is a tricky one because it's a lot like healing. As a complement to airbending, S tier for sure. But if we're looking at it like you just have flight and not airbending, then you're just a dude who's hard to catch. But an airbender with flight, like, what are you gonna do? You're not beating that guy. You're not catching that guy. Earthbenders are fucked. They're not getting up there. Waterbenders can probably whirlpool themselves up into the air, but all an airbender has to do is not fly over water to avoid that problem. So alone, flight is just kind of like a really convenient tool. But with airbending, it's damn near unbeatable. So with that being said, if I gave it S tier, I'm not really saying flight is S tier, I'm saying airbending is S tier. So I'm gonna have to give it a B. Here's the thing about bloodbending. Everyone always says, oh, bloodbending's the strongest one, you can control anybody with it. And for the longest time I was like, yeah, but only during a full moon. But you know what? That's once a month. And you know, that's pretty good. Once a month is pretty often to get a guaranteed win. I also feel like the only reason you can only bloodbend during a full moon is because nobody actually trains in it. I bet if bloodbending weren't like a war crime, and if like people developed schools for it, they could probably learn how to do it without the need of the full moon. I know Amon was like a mutant or like a special breed of bender, but I feel like the fact that he even exists means that with enough training, you could probably develop a bloodbending school. And if that's the case, yeah, bloodbending's the best one. Your opponent is done the second you lay eyes on them, and there are no consequences to the user. You can control them, snap their neck, do whatever you want. Who fucking cares? You bend their blood. Bloodbending should be an entirely uncontroversial S tier. I was actually surprised to find out that a lot of people don't consider ice to be a subbending category because all waterbenders can do it, but I've already done fucking 10 of these, so why draw the line here? It is kind of hard to talk about ice bending without talking about waterbending, since you're just freezing water. And so if we ignore the water aspect and just look at it as ice, then I guess it's worse earthbending, because if you can't waterbend, then you can't change its shape, and so then I guess you just have to hope there's ice lying around. So, you know what, never mind, I don't want to talk about ice bending. I'm just gonna keep it at like a low B and save it for water bending. Up next is seismic sense, which is a lot like spirit projection, if spirit projection didn't waste its day blowing me. Seismic sense allows you to have complete awareness of your environment, which is super useful. It makes it easier to fight multiple opponents at once because you always know where they are and what they're doing. You can never get snuck up on. You can feel your 2 best friends fucking in a tent from several feet away. It's an all-around great tool. And if we look at it as its own technique, completely separated from earthbending, I think it's still pretty damn powerful. Like, if you gave Suki seismic sense, she'd probably be unstoppable. The downside is that it's pretty useless against anything that isn't touching the ground. Like, I honestly have no idea how Toph ever fought any type of bender that wasn't Earth. Like, I get that she can sense when her opponent shifts their body weight and makes a move, but I don't get how seismic sense prepares you for a fireball flying 30 miles an hour towards your head. Also, if we're comparing them, it's also entirely useless against somebody with flight. Like, I don't know if I'd call one necessarily better, they're just different. What I'm getting at is seismic sense is a lot like flight in that it's more of a tool than anything else. So I'll put them right next to each other. Alright, everybody nice and pissed off yet? Especially now that I've managed to sneak lava bending into S tier? Look, all 4 main bending styles are S tier. Can we agree on that? Can that be a pretty cold take? I am fully aware that that is the entire point of the show. But can we also agree that this would be a pretty lame video if I just chickened out and said they were all equally good? That would suck. Where's the discourse in that? And even though my ranking's gonna piss a lot of people off, I honestly think that you would rather have a video piss you off than bore you. So even though air, earth, water, and fire are all S tier and all, like, pretty damn balanced, I'm still gonna rank them. So with that out of the way, as much as it pains me to say this, I think the worst one out of the 4 is gonna have to go to earthbending. Look, I'm a huge earthbending fan, okay? It's got the best defensive capabilities, Toph is a badass, it's got the most utility out of the bending styles because you can make structures and buildings with it. Earthbenders also display the most creative applications of their bending, which makes it super versatile. But if you took a waterbender, an airbender, an earthbender, and a firebender, put them in a log cabin, suspended it 1,000 feet in the air, and told them to fight, the earthbender is the only one that would be entirely screwed. Even if there's no water in the cabin, the waterbender could use their sweat. They could suck the moisture out of the wood. The earthbender is the only one that wouldn't be able to do anything. Also, even though earthbenders have metal bending and lava bending, which in my opinion are the best subbending categories, not every earthbender can do those. Only some earthbenders are able to metal bend or lava bend, whereas all waterbenders can ice bend and all firebenders can lightning bend. And I know you're probably thinking, oh, well, if you put a waterbender in the desert or a firebender on a snowy mountaintop, they're both screwed. And that's true, but so are the earthbenders. Those are the only 2 locations I can think of where a waterbender and a firebender would be entirely screwed. I could think of like 4 scenarios that put an earthbender out of commission. Earthbenders can permanently manipulate their terrain, which is unbelievably powerful, but only if that terrain is earth. After that, I think it's water for similar reasons. I actually used to think that waterbending was the best of the 4, but then I grew up. Look, we've already established that bloodbending is without a doubt the best out of all the bending categories. And even though I do think that with enough training, any waterbender could end up bloodbending without the full moon, I have no evidence to support that. I'd also like to remind you all that ice is pretty damn sick. Ice turns a pretty offensive bending technique into both an aggressive offensive technique and defensive one. I love that waterbenders have this defensive option, especially considering that fire and airbenders are almost entirely offensive. That mixed with their healing abilities turns waterbending into probably the second most versatile bending technique next to earth. That being said, you're never really getting the drop on anyone as a waterbender. Unless your opponent is standing directly above a grade of water, waterbenders typically have to control like a big string of water that your opponent can always keep their eyes on. If firebending is like using a sword, waterbending is like using a whip. It's so telegraphed because they always have to have this big strip of water floating around them. But the fact that water is a liquid, without a doubt my hottest take of the video so far, means waterbenders have more precise control over their element than probably any of the other benders. You can shape water into whatever you want, then you can freeze it to make any shaped item you want. It's incredibly versatile. But despite all of its options, it just isn't as strong as firebending. Look, I'll be honest, I have no idea how a firebender beats an earthbender in a fight. Other than during Sozin's Comet, I can't imagine a firebender breaking through an earthbender's defenses. That being said, firebending is so aggressive. What it lacks in defensive options, it completely makes up for in sheer aggression. And it's like so fast. It's about as telegraphed as a punch to the throat. The fact that firebenders are able to produce their own fire gives them a huge advantage over the other benders. They don't have to worry about a floating water whip. They don't have to stomp rocks out of the ground. They just fucking shoot fire. And if that weren't crazy enough, they can also shoot lightning out of their goddamn hands. You know, eventually. But I'd rather shoot lightning out of my fingertips in 40 minutes than not at all. One of the reasons ranking these 4 has been so difficult for me is because I didn't want to solely focus on the combat aspects of each element. I do value the fact that waterbenders can heal and that earthbenders can build structures. But again, the fact that firebenders can produce their own fire is just such a massive advantage. And like I said, if you put all the benders inside of a log cabin, firebenders would be the only one not disadvantaged. Well, firebenders and airbending's the best. Like, come on. Oh, but the airbenders were all exterminated. Yeah, because they were fucking pacifists. If the air nomads had the bloodlust that the firebenders did, air supremacy in like 2 weeks. There's some debate on whether or not the characters in the show can actually see the airbenders' attacks, or if they're just animated for us to see. Because air is invisible. But even if they can see the attacks, right? Even if the air in the show isn't entirely invisible. Airbenders are incredibly agile, super powerful, and air is everywhere. What they lack in defensive options, they make up for in evasive ones. The fact that they control the element that people need to breathe, yeah, that's a pretty big advantage. There's really not much I could say about airbenders that I didn't indirectly cover in the other benders. So yeah, airbending wins. But that is my definitive bending tier list. But let me know in the comments which of my opinions you guys hated the most. I'm also excited to see how other people would rank the elements. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe if you want to see more content like this, and I will see you guys next time.
But now I always seem to freeze.